Jesus. Are you ready to pull this back up, Luke? They just found the real
Oh, yeah.
Christian here, and the mimics vanished off into the woods, evaporated, I think is what was said.
Yep. So we immediately start putting all of our attention towards Kristen and huddle around her, and the Ranger's giving her water. We're so relieved when she starts slowly regaining consciousness. It takes about a full minute for her to start making sounds of her eyes starting to open. When she looks coherent enough, the Ranger asks if she's okay, and she just says, "What took you guys so long? It's been days." The Ranger follows up and asks her if she remembers anything. She barely gets out. "It told me you'd come, told me I'd be safe by the stairs." I didn't realize why that rubbed me the wrong way until Sam whispered to me, "That's exactly what the mimic said when we first found it." This realization to me was absolutely world-shattering because I realized that we didn't win. It's like the mimic knew we were going to find her like this and was mocking us from the beginning. Then even more questions started flooding my mind. Did it not want to get out of the park? What's its motive? Just to get us back to the stairs? Why does this thing look so deviously satisfied? We're tending to Kristen while I'm internally turning these questions over in my head. She's severely dehydrated and starving, so I really don't have time to think. We just have her slowly rehydrating from the Ranger's canteen and nibbling on protein bars from Sam's pack. I want to leave so bad, but we have to wait till she's strong enough to walk herself. The forest is way too dense for us to carry her, so we just assist her about 30 feet away from the stairs because it doesn't feel right just hanging out right next to them. We have to wait there for about a half hour. The part of me is very curious to see if the stairs disappear or transform in any way. We don't start questioning Kristen immediately because we want her to just focus on getting better. We all just focus on being as gentle and consoling as we possibly can. I could tell we all don't want her to see how shaken up we are because we just want her to feel safe. Once she seems calm and content enough, we all kind of huddle up to start our game plan. Our phones are working out, and even though the data is kind of spotty, we can see that we're only a mile away from the camp. Once I let them know how close we are, I could see it in their face that we had the exact same experience. Because they're as surprised as I am, because I felt like whatever the mimic did to us went on for hours. Before we could start talking and get into detail about any of our experiences, Kristen speaks up. Of course, she has to see if Nick is safe and okay at this point. She's standing up and seems okay to start walking, so we walk over to her and ensure that Nick is safe with his father. We calmly explain to her that we didn't feel safe having Nick at the campsite while we were looking for her, just in case he tried to run off and look for her himself. She had a little bit of a shame in her face. She nodded and accepted that as a pretty reasonable explanation. The Ranger asked if she's okay to start walking back to camp, and she nodded obediently. So we gathered all of our stuff and start walking for about 20 feet before the most putrid, rotten smell hits my nose. I know we all smell it at once based on everybody's body language. I immediately whip my head around to see if the source is the stairs, and of course, the stairs are nowhere to be found. And the Ranger looks at us and says, "We need to leave right now." We all feel guilty rushing Kristen. And after all she's been through, but it's clear that Ranger feels like we need to leave the area with a sense of urgency. So we really start picking up the pace. But it feels like the smell is following. It smells like a mix of sour sewage, rotten meat, and sulfur. After 5 straight minutes of it not losing any intensity, I ask, "What is that smell?" Sam replies quietly, because I don't think he wants Kristen to hear. "It's a carcass." Says with a certainty that I know is from experience. I whisper back, "One of their carcasses?" Ranger cuts me off and says, "It's carcass." But he says it in a way that Kristen wouldn't be able to tell what he actually meant. But me and Sam knew what he was implying. And the look on his face was also implying that we should be quiet. He finished our whispering conversation by saying, "If you see antlers, keep your head down, keep walking." I know I can't reply verbally, but internally, I was cynically joking to myself, great. I don't just worry about magical stares and the faceless mimic, but now I have to worry about a territorial stinky elk. I momentarily forgot that the most dangerous thing here is still Mother Nature, and the last thing we need is to be rushed by a 600-pound elk. We get through most of the hike back with zero complications, but we can see the start of the edge of the campsite through the trees. We're all about 100 yards away from the finish line when we hear an elk scream from behind us. If you've never heard an elk scream, it's horrifying and borderline human-like. I encourage you to look it up on YouTube. We start to pick up the speed a little bit until we're 20 feet away from the campsite. The elk lets out a second scream, but the tone changes a little bit, a half second into the scream, and it sounds like a young boy screaming, "Mom!" Kristen, panicky, whips her head around towards Ranger and says, "That was Nick. I thought you said my son was safe." Ranger grabs her both shoulders, not in an aggressive voice, but in a way that he's about to say she needs to listen. "I promise you that was not your son. Right now, we just need to get you to the lodge, and the second we get there, we'll call him. I promise." "Okay." And then to break the tension a little bit, he said with a smile, "I just found you. Please don't go running off in the woods again." This comforted Kristen enough to get her through the trees.
When we get out of the woods, it felt like I could finally breathe again. We were only in there for about 3 hours, but with everything that happened, I couldn't believe that it was just past noon. The campsite was still empty, but we needed to get Kristen into a vehicle and headed to the lodge before anybody came back, because it raised a lot of questions with other campers. Why is she still here? It was common knowledge that she was gonna leave that morning. We could tell she's peeking towards the campsite looking for her belongings, but the ranger gets ahead of it and he says, "Don't worry, your stuff left when Nick did." It was great, quick thinking by the ranger. "So now let's get you home," the ranger said. In my head, I'm considering asking her what she remembers. But during the 2-minute walk to the vehicle, I can tell that she's fully under the impression that she had a couple too many and got herself lost in the woods. I can see the embarrassment building on her face. Our current situation, that's kind of ideal, because we just need to get her out of here as soon as possible. She climbs into the vehicle, but before they drive off, the park ranger walkie-talkies the camp guides. He alerts them to bring the campers back to the campsite because there's an aggressive elk in the area, and he doesn't want them walking back after dark where they can't see one coming. And on the other end, one of the other camp guides replies, "Don't worry, we're already on our way back because an aggressive, quick, full cold front has moved through and nobody's dressed for it." I don't know what it was about the camp guide saying that, but it put a sense of urgency into the ranger as he starts to walk away to the vehicle, but shouts back to us before he gets in, "Boys, I'll get back as soon as I can. Stay away from the tree line, and if you smell it, hide." We nervously watch him drive off. It's only noon, and I'm absolutely exhausted. I catch myself just thinking about the devious look on the mimic's face before it disappeared and evaporated into nothing in the forest. It reminds me to check on my friend. This is the first time Sam and I have been able to have a minute to talk since everything that's gone down. So I just open up the conversation with, "Should we leave?" And Sam goes, "We can't. If it was just you that touched the stairs, I'd say let's go. But I cannot leave knowing that I might have just made everything worse when I stepped on the steps." Well, I was not surprised with that answer at all, because that's exactly what I was thinking earlier when everything happened to me. I tried to comfort him a little bit more. I even asked the question because it was the first thing that came to my mind. Pretty crazy how we were in that time loop back there. I don't really understand that. Sam looks at me funny and he says, "Time loop? Mine wasn't like that at all. Mine felt like sleep paralysis. I saw everything happening. I saw you losing it. I saw the ranger voluntarily switch spots with her, and I was trying to scream, but nothing would come out. And then she started talking to me, but not out loud. She was talking to me in my head. She just kept telling me that it was my turn to go up the steps and that we should really stop fighting it. And there was nothing that we could do. And she just kept asking me, do I know what the crows mean? And then I asked Sam, did she tell you what they meant? Like, what does she mean by that? Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about it this whole time. And Sam says no. She just kept taunting me with the question about the crows. But she did say that we'll know what they mean when we get back to the camp. That was basically our cue to start walking back to the camp because we're both looking for answers. I kept the dialogue going, and I asked him if our experiences were so different. What do we think happened to the ranger? He jokingly replied, I'm sure it was something unique and horrible, but I'm more interested to see what he knows about the source of that smell. We walked quietly for a second, straight ahead towards the logs to sit down. We could see from a distance the crows were still perched exactly where they were, and we just sat on the log straight across from them. It's funny because we were so tired we didn't even have enough energy to be scared of the crows at this point in time. We were just sitting, having a standoff with these things. They're staring at us and we're staring at them. And then one, all the way to the left, the crow all the way to the left, just squawks out of nowhere and just flies off. We just look at each other and nod. It turns out the mimic was right. We knew exactly what they meant, the crows meant. Sam just casually says, 1 down, 2 to go. And then he follows up and kind of shamefully asks me, did I do what you did? He was implying, did he have a seizure as well? I said, no, it just seemed like you were really trying hard to get to the top of the stairs, rushing as fast as you could. But I stopped you before you could get there. He says, did you feel that vibrations? And I said, yeah, same thing happened when same thing happened when both of us stepped on them. He asked me, do you think there's a correlation between how many steps you go up and the severity of the consequences? I replied, I really hope not. And then, right then, we hear laughing and talking approaching us. It's the group of campers coming back from fishing. Luckily, the chatter sounds very nice and pleasant. So that gives us a little bit of relief because we know nothing bad happened to them while they were out. Me and Sam do our best to keep everything under control, obviously, so nobody else knew. We didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. Everybody else is unloading all their gear and gathering around for lunch. Once everybody's settled in, one of the camp guides starts going around and he's doing a head count. And he shouts, we're 1 short. Everybody look around. Who's missing? Everybody looks around for the immediate family or friends or loved ones. And then 2 guys speak up playfully. They're both in their early 30s, like real outdoor-looking types. They said, don't worry, guys. That's just our buddy Pete. Sam and I looked at each other in fear and couldn't help but assume that this was a result of the stairs in the woods being stepped on again. To be continued.
Oh, man. I gotta know what happens next.
Yeah, there's the other part, man. We'll dive into that later. I mean, wow. What a cool story, though.
Yeah.
So when I sent this over to you guys, I sent it over in batches like, I'm going to read this part. Jack, you're going to read this part. Luke, you're going to read this part. Did you guys read the whole story, though?
I read, I was going to read it all, but then I thought to myself that I kind of wanted to experience it live. So I was like, I'm kind of spoiling it for myself. So I ended up not reading the whole thing in one sitting.
That was also my kind of feeling. I was like, I could get into my portion and I can experience that, but then I was like, I want to hear the experience of hearing the story from you guys when you do your guys' portions, and that way I can kind of get a feeling of how our listeners might feel as well. So I was just like in this mindset, like, you know what, I could read this whole thing, bash it out real fast, and then go from there. But then I was like, man, I wanted to see what it's like being on the other side of this, listening to it being read off by people. And so I was like excited to hear how you guys did your takes, because I knew how I was going to do mine. And so I was like, I want to hear how you guys do. And so I really enjoyed experiencing it with everybody else, except for the parts that were I had edited and did mine.
I knew it was going to be a little bit different because the last couple of weeks we've just been sharing a story, boom, table talk, right, afterwards. But I was curious, would they actually read the whole thing? Like, obviously I was so into this, I did. So I was kind of looking for your reactions as we went along. How did you guys feel about, we'll get back to the story in a second. How did you feel about the change in pace this week? Obviously, it's not something I think we could do every week, but.
Well, I really enjoyed it. It really felt like we were kind of like weaving the story together while we were reading it.
Yeah, I felt like we were in school, like taking turns reading, but we were actually paying attention.
Right, yeah.
I was going to say a slightly more ancient form of that would be like a Viking skalds would take turns telling a ghost story. And since this is a very druidic story as it is, with the mimics and the crows, which kind of remind me of Odin's ravens in a way, I was thinking more like that, but similar.
That's the exact same thing I was thinking, Luke. That's the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's what
Pilgrims and the Vikings and all that stuff.
Vikings, whatever.
What do you guys think about this story, though? It was so last week we talked about the stairs in the woods, and then I was able to find this.
I really love this. I always enjoy stories that involve going into the woods. I've always liked going into the woods as a kid, not at night. That's where I drew the line.
Not searching for missing people.
No. But I would, go on trails, go on hikes and things like that. And you just stare off out there and you're just like, what kind of things are going on out here when no one's watching? It's just the animals and just stuff like that. So I've always enjoyed woods and wood-based stories, I guess.
I've always been a big fan of preachers too, like, things that someone might have conjured in some past life, some sort of weird thing that shouldn't be here. And so like this idea of something coming into our world or being attracted to someone because they interact with something from their world, that kind of story always is like the perfect type of like story for me. Like, like it gives you a little bit of a chill, but it's also like, it kind of harkens back to old religions and stuff about, their, ritualistic offerings or something, just some sort of dark creature in the woods. So I've always liked stories like that in general. So this has been absolutely awesome to listen to and to talk about.
I thought this was like a good follow-up to what Jack teased last week, though.
Yeah.
You need to know what happened when you touch the stairs in the woods. This story is a little bit everywhere. I got a lot of controversy around it. I will say one thing. The story's made up, it's a great story. I mean, wow, how creative.
Is there another part to this? Like this?
I cut it off because I knew it would be past our time.
Well, I definitely want the rest of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's more. There's basically a second half. There's about the same amount left. Again, length.
Yeah, I would like to revisit it for sure and get the ending, get the final bits of the story.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's what happens when you step on the stairs in the woods. So
Yeah, don't do it.